The night they counted votes at Cedar Grove Elementary, I stood backstage listening to applause for the new PTA president, my stepfather, Rick Halverson. He looked at me like I was the defeated one, but the audit report hidden in my jacket pocket was the real final ballot. The whole town thought I supported family. Nobody knew I'd been secretly advising his opponent, an underestimated single mother. When the microphone passed to me, the school's live stream camera still rolling, I needed just 3 numbers to change the room's color: 118,000, 63, 5 minutes, the missing money, the fraudulent proxy votes, and the time left before county officers walked in. My name is Avery Hart, and I've spent the last 3 years analyzing data for Grayline Civic Analytics, a nonprofit that champions transparency in community organizations. But tonight, I wasn't here as a data analyst. I was here as the stepdaughter who refused to play along. The Cedar Grove Elementary cafeteria had been transformed into what Rick would call a proper venue. Folding chairs arranged in perfect rows, a makeshift stage with the school's best microphone, and a projection screen displaying PTA election results in Comic Sans, because of course it was Comic Sans. The smell of reheated coffee mixed with floor wax created that uniquely institutional atmosphere that made every school event feel simultaneously important and depressing. "Congratulations, Rick." Someone slapped him on the back, and he responded with that practiced contractor's handshake, firm enough to assert dominance, brief enough to move on to the next mark. My mother, Marla, stood beside him in her best Sunday dress, the one with tiny flowers that she thought made her look approachable. She caught my eye from across the room and mouthed, "Smile." I did smile, just not for the reasons she wanted. The final tally glowed on the screen: Rick Halverson, 287 votes. Nora Bell, 224 votes. A decisive victory. If you didn't know that 63 of those votes had materialized in the last 10 minutes via proxy ballots delivered by Ethan Cole, the PTA treasurer who just happened to work on Rick's contracting jobs during summer breaks. "Family sticks together," Rick whispered as he passed me, his breath carrying the mint he always chewed before public speaking. "Remember that, Avery." I nodded, feeling the weight of the manila folder in my jacket's inner pocket. 6 weeks of preparation condensed into 12 pages of spreadsheets, email trails, and transaction records. 6 weeks of secret meetings with Nora Bell, the single mother who ran a small bakery downtown and had the audacity to think the PTA should actually serve the students instead of serving as a pipeline for construction contracts. Nora sat 3 rows back, her daughter Emma beside her with a juice box and an iPad. She was already gathering her things, preparing for the graceful concession speech she'd practiced. She caught my eye, a quick glance that asked the question she couldn't voice. "Is it time?" "Not yet. Let Rick have his moment." "I want to thank everyone for their trust," Rick began, commandeering the microphone with the ease of someone who'd spent decades selling overpriced renovations to desperate homeowners. "Together, we're going to transform Cedar Grove, new bleachers for the gymnasium, upgraded playground equipment, renovated bathrooms, all without raising a single dollar in new fees." The crowd erupted in applause. Who doesn't love free improvements? Well, anyone who understood that free in Rick's vocabulary meant creatively financed through channels you're not supposed to question. I'd first noticed the discrepancies 3 months ago when I'd volunteered to digitize the PTA's financial records, a mind-numbing task everyone was happy to dump on the computer girl. The booster fund showed deposits of $118,000 over 18 months, but the corresponding expenditures were a maze of vague line items: community enhancement, facility consulting, project development, translation money moving from the PTA account to companies that traced back to the same LLC that held Rick's contracting business. But it wasn't the money that made me act. It was the dinner conversation 2 weeks ago when Rick had laughed about Nora's little cookies and coffee campaign and how some people just don't understand how real business works. My mother had laughed along, that nervous titter she'd perfected over their 5-year marriage. That night, I'd sent Nora a message through her bakery's Facebook page. "You have more support than you think. Let's talk strategy." Now, watching Rick glad-hand his way through the crowd. I pulled out my phone. The email to the Maple Ridge PTA Standards Committee was already drafted, waiting in my outbox. One tap would start the 72-hour audit window. One tap would turn this victory lap into a very different kind of race. But first, I wanted to hear what else Rick had to say, because in my experience, the guilty always talk too much when they think they've won. As my first act as president, Rick continued, I'm proposing we fast-track the bleacher renovation. I've already secured a preliminary bid from a reliable contractor, Halverson and Associates, will waive all consultation fees as my gift to the school. There it was, the conflict of interest wrapped in a bow of false generosity. My phone buzzed, a text from Nora. I'm trusting you. 3 rows behind her, I noticed 2 other parents exchanging glances, Diana Morrison and James Park, both of whom had asked pointed questions about the proxy ballots during the counting. They hadn't bought the explanation about busy working families participating remotely. The microphone made another round. The vice president-elect spoke about bake sale schedules. The secretary outlined the meeting calendar. Normal PTA business that would soon seem quaint compared to what was coming. When the microphone finally reached me, would our data expert like to say a few words? I stood slowly, letting the folder's edge peek out from my jacket. Thank you, I said, my voice steadier than my hands. I just have one question about tonight's results. Rick's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. My mother's fingers found her necklace. Could someone explain why 63 proxy ballots all have the same IP address in their email headers? The cafeteria fell silent except for the hum of the ancient ventilation system. Somewhere in the back, a juice box hit the floor. I had 5 minutes before the county officers arrived. Time to make them count. The microphone felt heavier as I watched Rick's jaw tighten. But before I could continue, Ethan Cole jumped up from his treasurer's table. That's a technical glitch, he said quickly. The school's email system routes everything through the same server. I can explain. Please do, I said, maintaining eye contact with Rick. Right after you explain why those 63 emails were all created within a 17-minute window yesterday afternoon. The cafeteria stirred. Parents looked at each other, then at their phones, then back at the projection screen still displaying the vote tallies. I let the silence stretch. Remembering what Nora had told me during one of our secret strategy sessions at her bakery, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people fill in the blanks themselves. This wasn't about revenge, exactly. It was about patterns, the same patterns I'd watched unfold for 5 years since Rick married my mother. I remembered the first family project after he moved in, the garage renovation that was supposed to take 2 weeks, but stretched to 3 months because Rick kept finding structural issues that required expensive fixes. My mother never questioned why the receipts didn't match the materials that showed up. She was too grateful to have someone who could handle things. That's how Rick operated, creating problems only he could solve, positioning himself as the indispensable hero while skimming from every transaction. The garage, the kitchen, the bathroom, and now, apparently, the entire elementary school. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Rick said, reaching for the microphone. His contractor's hands, scarred and capable, betrayed the slightest tremor. Avery's still learning how these systems work. Perhaps we should table this discussion. Actually, Diana Morrison stood up. Her accountant's instincts clearly triggered. I'd like to hear more about these proxy ballots. I submitted one myself, and I'm curious about this timeline. Me too, James Park added, especially since the PTA bylaws state that proxy submissions close 48 hours before voting. I pulled out my phone, letting everyone see me check the time. 3 minutes until the county officers arrive with the audit mandate, but we have time for one more number. My mother's face had gone pale. She knew that tone, the same one I'd used at 16 when I showed her the credit card statements Rick had hidden, the ones showing charges to construction supply stores while he billed her for premium materials. She'd chosen to look away then, chosen to believe his explanations about accounting errors and misunderstandings. I wouldn't let Cedar Grove Elementary make the same choice. $118,000, I announced, That's how much the PTA Booster Fund has paid to various consulting firms over the last 18 months. Firms that all share the same registered agent, Halverson and Associates, LLC. The cafeteria erupted, not in applause this time, but in the angry buzz of parents realizing they'd been played. Someone shouted about the fundraising drives, the car washes, the silent auctions where they'd bid on gift baskets to support their children's education. Rick grabbed the microphone. This is a family matter being blown out of proportion. Avery has never forgiven me for what? I interrupted, my voice carrying without amplification. For marrying my mother, for turning our home into your personal ATM, or for assuming I'd stay quiet because family sticks together. But it wasn't the family dinners I was thinking about. It was the larger system, the way Rick had colonized every space he entered. First our home, then my mother's savings, now the school, each time expanding his reach, his network of friendly contractors and convenient bylaws. I'd found the pattern while analyzing data at work. Grayline Civic Analytics specialized in identifying municipal corruption, tracking how public money flowed through private hands. The techniques were the same whether you were investigating a city council or a PTA. Follow the money, map the relationships, document everything. The audit will show, I continued, letting my training take over, that every major contract approved during Mr. Halverson's time as facilities coordinator went to companies connected to his business. The playground equipment supplier, his brother-in-law's company, the bathroom renovation contractor, his former business partner, the proposed bleacher replacement, already pre-bid to Halverson and Associates at 30% above market rate. Nora Bell stood up quietly, Emma's hand in hers. She didn't say anything she didn't need to. Her presence was enough. A reminder that this election had been about more than proxy ballots and construction contracts. It had been about whether Cedar Grove would be run for the benefit of all families, or just the ones who knew how to work the system. You can't prove any of this, Rick said, but his voice had lost its contractor's confidence. I smiled then, the same smile I'd given him at every family dinner where he'd explained why his latest project had gone over budget. I don't have to prove it. That's what audits are for. And speaking of which, the cafeteria doors opened. 2 officers from the Ridgefield County Ethics Commission entered, badges visible, folders in hand. They'd been waiting in the parking lot for exactly this moment, the public accusation that gave them jurisdiction to investigate. My phone buzzed. The email to the PTA Standards Committee had auto-sent, triggering the 72-hour emergency audit provision that Rick had voted against implementing last year. Funny how the safeguards you resist are the ones that eventually catch you. Mr. Halverson. The lead officer approached the stage. We need to secure all financial records related to PTA operations. If you could direct us to the treasurer's materials. Ethan Cole looked like he might vomit into the cash box he was suddenly clutching. My mother finally moved, walking not toward Rick, but toward the exit. She paused beside me, her hand briefly touching my arm. The house was enough, she whispered, but the school. I wanted to tell her that it was never enough for people like Rick, that the hunger just grew with each successful con, but she knew that already. She'd always known. As the officers began collecting documents, I slipped the manila folder from my jacket and handed it to Diana Morrison. The Parent Advisory Committee might want this. Full documentation of every transaction, cross-referenced with state corporation filings and dated communications. She took it with the reverence of someone who understood what real accountability looked like. Rick was still at the microphone, trying to spin the narrative, but no one was listening anymore. They were too busy pulling out phones, checking their own receipts, wondering what else they'd missed. That's the thing about trust in small communities once broken. It shatters completely. The next morning, I sat in my home office with 3 monitors displaying what I'd come to think of as the Rick Halverson Financial Symphony, 18 months of data that sang a very particular tune if you knew how to listen. Screen 1. The PTA Booster Fund records, officially digitized with timestamps and transaction IDs. Screen 2. North Carolina Secretary of State business filings, showing the web of LLCs, all traced back to the same registered agent. Screen 3 email metadata from the PTA server, which Ethan Cole had inadvertently given me full access to when he'd asked me to help modernize their systems. The doorbell rang. Through my window, I saw Nora Bell's Honda Civic in the driveway, Emma in the back seat with a coloring book. "I brought coffee," Nora said when I answered. "And questions." We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Rick had spread out his plans for the bathroom renovation that somehow cost 3 times the original estimate. Nora's questions were sharp, focused. She wasn't just a small bakery owner. She'd run her business through a pandemic, a divorce, and the daily juggling act of single motherhood. She knew about balance sheets and cash flow. "Walk me through the bleacher contract," she said, pulling out a notebook. "Diana Morrison says the numbers don't add up, but I need to understand exactly how he structured it." I pulled up the documents on my laptop. "See this line item, preliminary structural assessment, $35,000. That goes to TrueView Inspections, LLC. Guess who owns TrueView? Rick. Rick's cousin, Marcus Halverson, who has no inspection credentials but does have a very nice boat purchased 2 weeks after every assessment he performs." Nora made notes in handwriting that belonged on a wedding invitation. "And the actual construction, that's the beautiful part. The contract specifies modular aluminum framework with composite seating surfaces. Sounds impressive, right? Except I found the exact same specifications on a Chinese manufacturer's website, $180,000 delivered. Rick's bid, $420,000, with $150,000 in project management fees, and another $90,000 in site-specific customization. For bleachers? For bleachers that would be identical to the ones you can buy off the shelf." Emma called from the living room where I'd set her up with cartoons. Nora went to check on her, and I used the moment to pull up another file, the one I hadn't shown anyone yet. It was a spreadsheet of every PTA-funded project over the last 5 years, cross-referenced with Rick's employment history. The pattern was undeniable. Rick joins a community organization. Construction needs mysteriously increase. His network of contractors gets rich, and then he moves on to the next opportunity. Cedar Grove Elementary was his 4th school. "He's done this before," Nora said, reading over my shoulder. "Pine Valley Elementary, 2019. Riverside Middle, 2021. Oakwood Primary, 2022. Always the same pattern. Volunteer for facilities. Identify urgent needs. Steer contracts to his network." Why didn't anyone catch it? I'd asked myself the same question while staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned. Because he's smart about it, never takes direct payments, always has plausible explanations, and he counts on the fact that most people don't want to dig into community organization finances. They assume someone else is watching. My phone buzzed. Diana Morrison had created a group text with James Park and 3 other parents who'd started asking questions after last night's revelation. Diana found discrepancy in playground equipment purchase. Invoice shows commercial grade, but what was installed looks residential. James: "My contractor buddy says those bathroom fixtures are builder grade, not the commercial spec we paid for." Unknown number, "This is Dr. Sarah Webb. I serve on the hospital board. We had similar issues with a facilities coordinator named Richard Halverson in 2020. Different middle initial. Same MO." The web was unraveling faster than I'd anticipated. Each parent was becoming an investigator, turning their professional expertise toward the puzzle of where their fundraising dollars had really gone. "I need to ask you something," Nora said, closing her notebook. "Why didn't you come forward sooner? Why help me in secret instead of just exposing him directly?" It was a fair question. I'd spent weeks wrestling with it myself, usually at 3 a.m. when the weight of keeping secrets pressed against my chest. "Because I wanted it to stick," I said. "If I'd just made accusations as the bitter stepdaughter, it would have been dismissed as family drama. Rick's very good at playing the reasonable stepfather dealing with a difficult child. I needed documentation. I needed patterns. I needed other people to see it for themselves." And the election was the perfect opportunity. He was so focused on winning, on establishing his next power base, that he got sloppy. Those proxy ballots. He usually would have spread them out over days, used different IP addresses, but he wanted a decisive victory. Nora gathered Emma's crayons, movements careful and deliberate. The audit committee wants to meet tonight, 7 p.m., Diana's house. Can you present your findings? I looked at the screens full of evidence, the manila folders stacked beside my printer, the USB drives backed up in triplicate. 6 weeks of work condensed into irrefutable proof. I'll be there. After they left, I sat in the quiet of my house. Rick's house, technically, though the deed was in my mother's name, another pattern: he never put assets in his own name, always maintaining plausible deniability. My mother hadn't come home last night. Her sister and Charlotte had texted to let me know she was safe, processing, finally ready to see what she'd been avoiding for years. I didn't blame her for the blindness. Love could make you stupid. But I did credit her for walking out of that cafeteria, for choosing truth over comfort, even if it came too late. The PTA server pinged with a new email. Ethan Cole, writing from his personal account. Avery, I want to testify. I have records going back 3 years. Rick promised me a job with his company after my divorce. Said I needed to play ball first. I never meant for it to go this far. Can we talk, Ethan? I forwarded it to the Ethics Commission and added Ethan to my list of interviews for tonight. Every accomplice who flipped made the case stronger, made it harder for Rick to claim this was all a misunderstanding. 3 monitors full of data, 18 months of patient investigation, one very public unraveling. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or violent. Sometimes it's just methodically documenting the truth and letting mathematics do the rest. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. You think you're smart, Rick said, his contractor's drawl stripped of its usual charm. But you don't understand how things really work. I understand exactly how things work, I replied, already recording. That's why you're talking to me from your truck instead of your office. The line went dead. I saved the recording and added it to the evidence folder. Every threat, every attempted manipulation, it all became part of the pattern that would ensure he couldn't do this again. The audit was just beginning. The unmarked envelope appeared under my apartment door at 6 a.m., 2 days after the election night revelation. No postmark, no return address, just my name written in block letters. Inside a single sheet of paper with one line, stop counting or start losing. I photographed it, emailed it to the ethics officers, and went back to my spreadsheets. If Rick thought anonymous threats would work on someone who'd parsed 3 years of financial data for fun, he'd fundamentally misunderstood his stepdaughter. But the pressure came from other directions too. Avery, honey, let's talk about this like adults. My mother's voice on the phone was carefully modulated, the way it got when she was reading from a script Rick had prepared. Your stepfather says there's been a misunderstanding. If you just explain to the committee that you misinterpreted some numbers. Mom, he's using you. He's trying to save our family. He's trying to save himself. There's a difference. The silence stretched between us, filled with 5 years of willful blindness and careful deflections. When she finally spoke again, her voice had dropped the script. The Fairmont Avenue house, the one he said was a rental investment, it's not in my name, is it? No, Mom. It's owned by RH Properties Management, LLC, along with 2 other houses he bought with PTA contractor kickbacks. This time when the line went dead, I knew it wasn't coming back. The harassment escalated throughout the week. My car tires deflated overnight, all 4, because Rick never did anything halfway. Anonymous reviews appeared on Grayline Civic Analytics Google page, claiming I fabricated data for personal vendettas. Someone called my supervisor suggesting they investigate their unstable employee. Each incident got documented, photographed, reported. I'd learned from analyzing corruption cases that the cover-up often provided more evidence than the original crime. Diana Morrison called an emergency parent meeting for Thursday night. Not at the school, Rick still had allies there, but at the community center downtown. Word spread through text chains and Facebook groups, the digital equivalent of suburban telephone trees. "We need to see everything," Diana said when I arrived with my laptop and boxes of printouts. "Not just the headlines. Parents deserve to know exactly where their money went." The room filled quickly. Not just PTA regulars, but parents who'd never attended a meeting, drawn by the promise of finally understanding why the annual fundraising goals kept increasing while visible improvements remained minimal. I set up my presentation with the same care I used for Gray Line board meetings. Facts first. Speculation never. Let the data tell its own story. "Let's start with the booster fund," I began, projecting the first spreadsheet. Established in 2021 to support special projects. Initial balance, $5,000 from a bake sale. Current balance, $1.47. Total deposits over 18 months, $118,000. A father in the back raised his hand. "Where did $118,000 come from?" "Fundraising events, corporate matching, direct donations. You all generated this money through car washes, silent auctions, and writing checks. Now let's see where it went." Click, new slide, a flowchart showing money moving from the booster fund to various LLCs, then to other companies, then eventually cycling back to businesses connected to Rick. "Jesus," someone whispered. "It's money laundering." "Technically, it's embezzlement with extra steps," I corrected. "But the effect is the same. Your donations bought Rick Halverson a boat, 2 rental properties, and a very nice truck." The room erupted. Parents shouted over each other, demanding receipts, threatening lawsuits, calculating how many hours they'd spent selling wrapping paper to fund Rick's retirement portfolio. Ethan Cole stood up from his seat near the back. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. "I helped him," he announced, voice shaking. "I processed the transfers. I need to tell you all what I know." The room quieted. Ethan's confession took 20 minutes, detailing how Rick had recruited him, promised him work, then gradually made him complicit in increasingly creative accounting. The genius of Rick's system was making everyone a little bit guilty take a small payment here, fudge a number there, until you were too deep to report anything without implicating yourself. "He targets people in financial distress," Ethan explained. "Single parents, recent divorces, job losses, offers help, then extracts loyalty." Nora Bell nodded slowly from her seat. I realized Rick had probably tried to recruit her too, but she'd had the integrity to run against him instead. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code Rick's lawyer. "Ms. Hart, you are hereby directed to cease and desist all defamatory statements regarding Mr. Halverson. Failure to comply will result in legal action." I screenshot it and added it to my evidence folder. Threatening legal action was Rick's tell. He only did it when he was cornered. "There's more," I continued, pulling up the email metadata. "The proxy ballots that decided the election, they weren't just from the same IP address. They were created using a template with specific formatting quirks, extra spaces after commas, British spellings despite supposedly coming from local parents. The same quirks appear in emails from TrueView Inspections LLC. Diana Morrison had been taking notes. She looked up, calculator in hand. "If we reverse all the fraudulent transactions, recover the misdirected funds, and void the illegitimate contracts, how much are we talking about?" Conservatively, $400,000 over 3 years. The number hung in the air like an accusation. That was college funds, family vacations, mortgage payments, real money extracted from real families under the guise of improving their children's education. A woman I didn't recognize stood up. "My ex-husband does construction. He bid on the bathroom renovation last year, lost to a company that doesn't even have a contractor's license. Now I know why." More stories emerged. Legitimate businesses undercut by Rick's network. Volunteer hours spent on fundraisers that enriched one man. The small corruptions that had metastasized into systematic theft. "What do we do?" someone asked. I closed my laptop. "That's not my decision. I've given you the data. The Ethics Commission has the evidence. Ethan's willing to testify. The patterns are clear. What happens next is up to you as a community." But I knew what would happen. I'd seen it in other cases Gray Line had investigated. Once the real numbers came out, Once people understood the scope of the betrayal, they wouldn't settle for recovery. They'd want consequences. As the meeting broke up, parents clustered in small groups, exchanging phone numbers and email addresses. An impromptu task force formed accountants, lawyers, business owners who understood both the crime and the cleanup. Nora approached as I packed up my equipment. "Thank you," she said simply. "I know this cost you." I thought about my mother, probably sitting in her sister's guest room, finally facing the truth about her husband, about the threatening messages and slashed tires, about the bridges burned with people who'd choose Rick's version of reality over documented facts. "He cost us all," I replied. "I just kept the receipts." Outside, the parking lot buzzed with continued conversations. Parents who'd never spoken before bonded over shared outrage. The community that Rick had tried to exploit was knitting itself back together, stronger for understanding its vulnerabilities. My phone rang. The caller ID showed the Ridgefield County Sheriff's Office. "Ms. Hart, this is Detective Sarah Chaya Chen. We've been asked to open a criminal investigation based on the Ethics Commission's preliminary findings. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning?" I confirmed the appointment and walked to my car, checking the tires out of habit, all inflated, though there was a new scratch along the driver's side door. The real escalation was just beginning. Rick Halverson didn't like losing control, and I'd just taken away his favorite toy. But I had something he didn't: 3 monitors full of evidence, a community ready to testify, and the patient certainty that comes from knowing the math never lies. The 72-hour audit window opened like a storm system moving through Maple Ridge. What started as a PTA financial review had evolved into something larger, a full forensic accounting that would determine not just the election results, but potential criminal charges. Diana Morrison's living room became our war room. By Friday afternoon, we had transformed her dining table into a command center: 3 laptops, 2 printers, boxes of binders, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. The team had grown beyond angry parents to include 2 CPAs, a retired FBI accountant, and a corporate fraud investigator who'd driven down from Raleigh because, in her words, "I hate people who steal from schools." "We need to move fast," Diana announced, distributing color-coded folders. "The emergency bylaws give us 72 hours from the initial complaint to present findings. That's Sunday at 8:47 p.m. I pulled up the master spreadsheet I'd been refining. I've identified 17 shell companies connected to Rick's network. Each one has received PTA funds. But here's the interesting part: they all share the same tax preparation firm. Let me guess. The fraud investigator, Lydia Morrow, said, "That firm is also connected to Rick, his brother-in-law, who's currently on vacation in the Cayman Islands." The room exchanged knowing looks. Nobody vacations in the Caymans by accident when fraud investigations begin. We divided into teams. One group traced the money flows, mapping each transaction like a genealogist building a family tree. Another team collected affidavits from contractors who'd been shut out of bidding. A third group worked on recovering original documents, invoices, receipts, work orders that Ethan Cole had started producing from boxes hidden in his garage. "Holy shit," James Park said, looking up from a stack of invoices. "These are the same invoice numbers, just with different dates and amounts." He was literally recycling paperwork. I wasn't surprised. Rick's confidence had made him lazy. When you've gotten away with something at 4 schools, you stop worrying about details. My phone buzzed constantly. Some messages were supportive parents offering help, sharing their own suspicions. Others were less pleasant. Rick's allies were mobilizing, spreading rumors that this was a witch hunt, that I was a disgruntled stepdaughter trying to destroy a good man. "Let them talk," Lydia advised. "Every defense attorney will tell their client to shut up. The fact that Rick's people are making noise means they're panicking." By Saturday morning, we had assembled what Lydia called a prosecutor's dream documentary evidence of 63 fraudulent proxy ballots, all originating from IP addresses linked to Rick's business, $118,000 in diverted funds, traced through 17 shell companies, work orders for projects that were never completed, invoices for premium materials when contractor grade was installed. emails discussing profit sharing between Rick and his network. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source. Nora arrived at noon with a banker's box and a strange expression. "My ex-husband is a systems administrator. He helped me with something." Inside the box, printed screenshots from a private Slack channel called Halverson Heroes, where Rick and his crew had coordinated their scheme. Apparently, Ethan Cole had admin access and had given Nora's ex the login before his crisis of conscience fully flowered. The messages were damning. Rick joking about those suburban suckers. His cousin Marcus calling parents ATMs with anxiety disorders. Discussions of how to split the profits from the bleacher project that hadn't even been approved yet. "This is conspiracy," Lydia breathed. "Documented, time-stamped conspiracy to commit fraud." We worked through Saturday night, fueled by righteous anger and gas station coffee. Each new revelation hardened our resolve. These weren't crimes of passion or desperation. This was systematic exploitation of parental dedication. By Sunday afternoon, we had compiled everything into a presentation that would make a federal prosecutor weep with joy. Financial forensics, documentary evidence, witness testimony, and a pattern of behavior spanning multiple years and jurisdictions. 1 hour until deadline, Diana announced. "Are we ready?" I looked around the room at exhausted faces, parents who'd given up their weekend, professionals who'd donated their expertise, a community that had chosen justice over convenience. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out my final folder. "I've been tracking Rick's response to our investigation. He's been busy too." I spread out printouts from the county recorder's office, all time-stamped within the last 48 hours. He's transferring assets, the rental properties, his boat, 2 vehicles all suddenly owned by trusts in his children's names from his first marriage. Classic asset protection. "He knows he's going down," Lydia said with satisfaction. "This is what guilty people do." The PTA Standards Committee had arranged for the presentation to be held in the middle school auditorium, Cedar Grove Elementary, suddenly felt too small for what had become a community reckoning. The live stream link had been shared across every parent Facebook group and Nextdoor thread in the district. As we loaded boxes into cars, my mother called. "I'm coming tonight," she said without preamble. "I need to see this through." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. I signed some of those checks. Avery, I attended those fundraisers. I chose not to see what was obvious. The least I can do is witness the truth." The auditorium was packed by 7 p.m. Not just Cedar Grove families, but parents from Pine Valley, Riverside, and Oakwood Rick's previous hunting grounds. The PTA Standards Committee sat at a raised table. 5 volunteers who'd probably never imagined they'd be presiding over something like this. Rick was there too, front row, flanked by 2 men in suits who radiated lawyer from their posture alone. He'd abandoned the friendly contractor aesthetic for a conservative blazer, trying to look like a wronged businessman instead of a cornered predator. The committee chair, an older woman who'd taught 3rd grade for 30 years before retiring, called the meeting to order. "We're here to review evidence related to irregularities in the Cedar Grove Elementary PTA election and associated financial matters. Ms. Morrison, as lead complainant, you have the floor." Diana stood, steady despite the weight of the moment. "What we're about to show you is the result of 72 hours of investigation by concerned parents and volunteer professionals. We're not here to prosecute, that's for other authorities to decide. We're here to protect our school and ensure our election reflects the actual will of the parents, not fraudulent manipulation." She nodded to me, and I connected my laptop to the projection system. The first slide appeared, "Following the Money, a forensic analysis of PTA fund misappropriation." Rick shifted in his seat. His lawyers leaned in to whisper, "Time to show them what data analysts do when you threaten their families and steal from their communities." "Let's begin with the proxy ballots," I said, voice carrying in the packed auditorium. Exhibit A, 63 votes that violated every principle of democratic participation. The 72 hours were up. The audit was complete. Now came the reckoning. The auditorium's live stream camera blinked red as I advanced to the second slide. 800 parents in seats. thousands more watching online. Rick's lawyers scribbled notes, but their client sat perfectly still, the stillness of a man calculating exits. Exhibit A details the proxy ballot fraud, I began, my voice steady despite the weight of the moment. 63 votes submitted electronically between 4:17 and 4:34 p.m. on Election Day, all from the same 3 IP addresses, all using identical syntax patterns in the authorization text. Click. The screen filled with email headers, IP addresses highlighted in yellow. But here's what's interesting, I continued. These IP addresses don't belong to busy parents voting from work. They belong to Halverson and Associates, TrueView Inspections, and a Kinko's on Brewer Street where security footage shows Ethan Cole purchasing computer time. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back shouted, "Show us the money." Diana took over, walking through the financial analysis with the precision of someone who'd spent 30 years in corporate accounting. Each slide built the case methodically: deposits into the booster fund, transfers to shell companies, payments to Rick's network, assets purchased with school money. $118,000 over 18 months, she stated. Not lost, not mismanaged, stolen. Rick's lawyer stood. "This is a kangaroo court. We demand—" "Sit down. Counsel." The committee chair interrupted. "This is a PTA review, not a legal proceeding. You'll have your chance to respond." The lawyer sat, but Rick leaned forward, his contractor's hands gripping the seat in front of him. I knew that posture he was planning something. Lydia Morrow took the microphone next, introducing herself and her credentials. "I've investigated corporate fraud for 22 years. What we've uncovered here isn't amateur hour. It's a sophisticated scheme that exploited the trust inherent in community organizations." She clicked through the Slack screenshots, each message more damning than the last. Parents gasped at the casual contempt, the jokes about fleecing the flock, the detailed discussions of profit margins on never-completed projects. Then came the comparative analysis, Rick's pattern across 4 schools. Nearly $1 million total, diverted from education to his personal empire. Pine Valley Elementary still hadn't recovered from the budget shortfall his tenure created. "But we're not here just to show what was taken," Lydia said. "We're here to show what can be recovered." New slides. Asset traces, property records, bank accounts identified through financial forensics, the rental properties bought with school funds, the boat registered to yet another LLC, the systematic movement of assets in the last 72 hours as Rick tried to shelter his gains. Nora Bell presented next, her baker's precision evident in how she documented every interaction with Rick's campaign. "He approached me 3 months ago, said if I dropped out, he'd ensure my bakery got the exclusive catering contract for school events. When I refused, the health department received anonymous complaints about my kitchen." She produced the complaints, the inspection reports finding no violations, the timeline showing they'd all occurred within days of rejecting Rick's offer. More parents testified, a contractor who'd been blacklisted for refusing to inflate bids, a teacher who'd questioned why bathroom renovations used residential fixtures instead of commercial grade, a former PTA treasurer from Oakwood Primary who'd been pushed out when she'd started asking questions. The evidence mounted like sediment, layer upon layer, building an unassailable foundation of fact. Finally, it was my turn for the closing presentation. 3 days ago, Cedar Grove Elementary held an election. According to the official tally, Rick Halverson won by 63 votes. We've now shown that those 63 votes were fraudulent, submitted through a coordinated effort to subvert democracy itself. I pulled up the final slide, a simple spreadsheet showing the real vote count after removing the fraudulent ballots. The legitimate winner, by a margin of 224 to 224 is... I paused, checking my math one more time. Actually, it's a tie, which, according to PTA bylaws, triggers a runoff election with paper ballots only and mandatory ID verification. The auditorium erupted. Rick shot to his feet, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "This is bullshit," he shouted, his contractor's drawl thick with rage. "You can't just throw out votes because..." Because they're fake, someone yelled back. Because you stole them like you stole everything else. The committee chair banged her gavel, actually a kindergarten teaching bell, which somehow made it more authoritative. Mr. Halverson, you'll have 5 minutes to respond to these allegations. Rick straightened his blazer, trying to recapture his salesman's charm. But as he approached the microphone, something shifted in the room. Parents who'd been neutral, even supportive, leaned away. The evidence had been too thorough, too damning. These accusations, he began, are the desperate attempts of a stepdaughter who— Stop! My mother's voice cut through the auditorium. She stood in the middle section, still wearing her hospital scrubs from a weekend shift. Just stop, Rick. They have the receipts. They have the emails. They have everything. She looked at me, then back at him. I've been going through our files at home. Would you like me to share what I found in your office? The second set of books the contract's already drafted for projects that haven't been approved. Rick's face went through several colors, settling on a mottled purple. His lawyers whispered urgently, probably calculating billable hours for the criminal defense that would follow. I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights, he said finally. This isn't a criminal proceeding, the committee chair reminded him, but we'll note your refusal to address the evidence. The committee huddled for exactly 3 minutes. When they returned, their decision was unanimous. The election results are invalidated due to fraudulent ballots. A new election will be held in 2 weeks. Paper ballots only, with identification required. Furthermore, we're recommending immediate suspension of all pending contracts and a full forensic audit by an independent firm. But they weren't done. Additionally, we're forwarding all evidence to the district attorney's office and recommend that Mr. Halverson be permanently banned from any position of financial responsibility within the school district. The gavel bell rang once more. Rick stood slowly, his lawyers flanking him. As he passed my row, he paused, leaning in close enough that I could smell his mint gum. This isn't over, he whispered. You're right, I replied, holding up my phone showing the recording app. It's just beginning. That threat will go nicely with the others in my evidence file. His lawyers pulled him away, but not before I saw something I'd never seen in 5 years of family dinners and uncomfortable holidays, fear in Rick Halverson's eyes. As the auditorium began to empty, parents stopped to shake hands, exchange contact information, make plans. The infrastructure of corruption was being replaced by something stronger, a community that now knew what to watch for. Nora approached with Emma, who was clutching a library book about butterflies. So, Nora said, 2 weeks to campaign properly this time. You'll win, I said. The real vote was never close. My mother waited by the exit, looking older but somehow lighter. I filed this morning, she said quietly. The lawyer says the house is protected since it predates the marriage, but everything else— You did the right thing. 5 years too late. But not 6. Outside, the parking lot hummed with conversation. Local news vans were setting up. Having gotten wind of the live stream, the story would spread suburban PTA president caught in massive fraud scheme. Other schools would start checking their books. Other communities would start asking questions. I walked to my car, feeling the weight of 3 sleepless nights settling into my bones. My phone already had 17 messages from journalists, 12 from parents at other schools, and 3 from law enforcement agencies. But first, I needed sleep, and maybe a very large pizza. The audit was complete, the reckoning delivered, democracy restored, one spreadsheet at a time. Rick Halverson had learned the hard way that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the biggest voice or the most connections. Sometimes it's the quiet one with Excel skills and a very good memory for numbers. The knock came at 5:47 a.m., 5 days after the audit presentation. Not the polite tap of a neighbor or the authoritative pound of law enforcement, but something in between, measured, patient, professional. Detective Sarah Walsh stood on my doorstep with a tablet and a tired smile. Ms. Hart, I'm with the District Attorney's Economic Crimes Unit. We need your help building the criminal case. All of it, every spreadsheet, every email, every pattern you've identified. Behind her, 2 forensic accountants waited with empty boxes and evidence bags. "Coffee first," I offered. "God, yes." As they systematically copied my files, I realized the true weight of what we'd uncovered. This wasn't just about one PTA election anymore. Rick's network extended across the county, possibly the state. Each document we'd assembled for the audit had become evidence in what Detective Walsh called the largest school fraud case in North Carolina history. My phone buzzed a text from Diana Morrison with a screenshot from the Cedar Grove Facebook group. Someone had posted photos of Rick at the private airfield outside town, loading boxes into a small plane. "He's running," I told Walsh. She barely looked up from her tablet. "Border Patrol has been notified. TSA 2. His passport was flagged 3 days ago," she smiled. "We do appreciate the community watch updates, though. Your neighbors have been very thorough." They had been. Parents who'd felt helpless during Rick's tenure had channeled their anger into documentation. Every movement, every asset transfer, every attempt to liquidate property got reported in real time. Maple Ridge had developed an immune system, and Rick Halverson was the infection it was determined to expel. By noon, my dining room looked like a satellite office of the DA's Economic Crimes Unit. Walsh and her team cross-referenced every transaction, building what prosecutors called the chain, irrefutable documentation linking criminal intent to criminal action. "This Slack channel," Walsh said, shaking her head. They actually discussed their crimes in writing, with timestamps and emoji reactions. "Criminals aren't always smart," one of the accountants offered. "Just confident." A knock interrupted us. Nora Bell stood at my door with a grocery bag and Emma. "Thought you might need lunch," she said, then noticed the law enforcement presence. "Or should I come back?" "She's cleared," Walsh said. "In fact, Ms. Bell, we'll need your testimony about the bribery attempt." As Nora unpacked sandwiches from her bakery, Emma settled on my couch with her coloring books. The domestic normalcy felt surreal against the backdrop of evidence processing. "There's something else," Nora said quietly. "Other parents have been getting calls, job offers out of state, sudden problems with loans, health department visits to their businesses. It's like someone's trying to pressure everyone who testified." Walsh's expression hardened. "Document everything. Record if possible. Witness intimidation is a federal crime." My laptop dinged with an encrypted email from Ethan Cole. He'd been in protective custody since offering to testify, but he'd maintained access to the financial systems with law enforcement approval. "Rick's trying to access the PTA accounts remotely," his message read. "The login attempts are coming from a VPN, but the pattern matches his usual password structure." I forwarded it to Walsh, who immediately made a phone call. Within minutes, they'd traced the VPN to a motel outside Charlotte. By the time they arrived, Rick was gone. But they found something better: his laptop, still logged into multiple accounts, abandoned in his haste to run. "Panic makes people sloppy," Walsh observed. The afternoon brought reporters. Local news had picked up the story, but now national outlets were calling. "School fraud scheme rocks suburban community." PTA president's $1 million deception. How one data analyst exposed years of theft. I declined most interviews. This wasn't about me, it was about parents who'd worked double shifts to contribute to fundraisers, about teachers who'd made do with less while Rick skimmed from their budgets, about communities that trusted too easily and suffered for it. But Diana convinced me to do one interview with a financial crimes podcast. "People need to know what to look for," she argued. "How many other Rick Halversons are out there?" As evening approached, my mother arrived with 2 boxes and red eyes. "His office at home," she said simply. "I thought you should see what else he was planning." Inside contracts for 2 more schools in neighboring districts, already drafted with his network of shell companies as preferred vendors. Business cards for a new identity: Richard Hansen, educational facilities consultant. Brochures for property in Costa Rica. "He wasn't going to stop," my mother said. "Even if we hadn't caught him here, he would have just moved on to the next community." "That's what predators do," Walsh said gently. "They find new hunting grounds. But thanks to all of you, his hunting days are over." A commotion outside interrupted us. Through the window, I saw 3 police cars surrounding a familiar pickup truck in my driveway. Rick, desperate or stupid enough to return, sat in the driver's seat as officers approached with weapons drawn. "Stay inside," Walsh ordered, hand moving to her service weapon. But Rick didn't run or fight. He simply sat there as they pulled him from the truck, his contractor's bravado finally exhausted. As they cuffed him, his eyes found mine through the window. I expected rage, threats, the usual bluster. Instead, I saw something else, the hollow look of a man who'd built an empire on lies and watched it crumble in less than a week. They found $50,000 cash in the truck, along with falsified documents and a loaded handgun. The arrest added federal charges to his growing list of crimes. As the police cars pulled away, neighbors emerged from their houses. Some applauded, others just watched, processing the drama that had unfolded in their quiet suburb. Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Is the bad man going away?" "Yes," I told her. "He's going away." "Good," she said, returning to her coloring. "Mommy says we can have good people at school now." The truth of it hit me then. This wasn't just about catching a criminal or recovering stolen funds. It was about reclaiming spaces that should be safe, honest, dedicated to children rather than exploitation. Walsh's team packed up their evidence boxes as night fell. "We'll need you to testify," she said. "Multiple jurisdictions, possibly federal court. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the last 5 years, the gaslighting, the small thefts that preceded the large ones, the way Rick had made corruption seem normal, even inevitable. "I've been preparing since the day he married my mother," I said. After everyone left, I sat in my quiet house with my laptop and the satisfaction of work completed. 3 monitors worth of data had become evidence. Evidence had become justice. Justice had become prevention for future communities. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Emergency PTA meeting tomorrow. We need to elect a real president." Then another from my mother. "Divorce lawyer says the house is safe. Starting over at 52. Thank you." And one from Nora. "Victory party at the bakery this weekend. I'll make your favorite." But the last message was the one that mattered most. An email from the National PTA, forwarding our audit report to every chapter in the country with a cover note. "Please review your financial controls and election procedures. Transparency prevents tragedy." Somewhere tonight, another data analyst might be noticing discrepancies. Another parent might be asking uncomfortable questions. Another community might be protecting itself from the Rick Halversons of the world. I closed my laptop and poured a glass of wine. The audit was complete. The arrest was made. The reckoning had arrived with handcuffs and federal charges. Tomorrow, Cedar Grove Elementary would start healing. Tonight, I would sleep soundly for the first time in months, knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't personal, it's justice that protects everyone who comes after. The new PTA election took place on a Tuesday evening, exactly 2 weeks after the audit revelations. Paper ballots only, IDs checked at the door, parent volunteers from 3 different schools monitoring the process. Democracy had returned to Cedar Grove Elementary, wearing sensible shoes and carrying clipboards. I stood at the back of the cafeteria, watching parents line up to vote. No proxy schemes, no digital manipulation, just neighbors exercising their right to choose who would oversee their children's educational funding. "Nervous?" Diana Morrison asked, appearing beside me with 2 cups of coffee. "Not anymore," I replied. "The math is clean now." And it was. Every ballot traced to a real person, every person verified as a current parent or guardian, the way it should have been from the start. The counting took less than an hour. When the committee chair, the same retired teacher who'd presided over the audit, read the results, no one was surprised. Nora Bell, 312 votes, write-in candidates, 18 votes combined. Ms. Bell, congratulations on your election as PTA president. The applause was different this time, genuine, warm, untainted by the shadow of corruption. Nora took the microphone with steady hands, Emma beaming from the front row. "My first act as president," she announced, is to implement the Morrison Protocol. Diana blushed as parents cheered. The Morrison Protocol was our community's new standard monthly financial reports posted publicly, all contracts requiring 3 independent bids, and quarterly audits by rotating parent volunteers with financial backgrounds. My second act, Nora continued, is to establish the Heart Fellowship. I nearly dropped my coffee. Each year, we'll sponsor a local high school student interested in data analysis or forensic accounting to attend a summer program, because sometimes the best investment in our children's safety is teaching them to follow the money. After the meeting, I found myself on the playground, sitting on one of the substandard swings Rick had insisted were premium equipment. My mother sat beside me on another swing, both of us barely fitting in the seats designed for elementary schoolers. "The divorce was finalized yesterday," she said quietly. "He didn't contest it. Hard to argue for alimony from federal prison. How are you doing?" She considered the question, pushing herself slightly on the swing. "Free, poor, but free. The forensic accountants found more hidden assets, but they're all being seized. I'll have the house and my job. That's enough to start over." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm grateful. You saved more than just the PTA. Avery, you saved me from spending the rest of my life with a man who saw everyone as a mark." We swung in silence, 2 grown women on a playground in the dark, finding peace in the rhythmic creaking of chains. My phone lit up with notifications. The state PTA had adopted our audit template. 3 more school districts had launched investigations based on our findings. The Halverson network was unraveling across the Southeast, a cascade of discoveries triggered by one election night revelation. "What will you do now?" my mother asked. I'd been thinking about that. Grayline had offered me a promotion, a lead role in their new educational fraud division. The FBI had reached out about consulting work. Even a true crime podcast wanted to hire me as a technical advisor. "I think," I said slowly, "I'm going to stay right here. Keep my regular job. Volunteer with the PTA. Make sure what we built doesn't fade when the crisis passes." Because that was the real danger, that communities would tighten controls in the aftermath of scandal, then gradually relax as memory faded and trust rebuilt. Someone needed to be the institutional memory, the person who remembered why every check required 2 signatures. 3 weeks later, I sat in federal court, watching Rick Halverson plead guilty to 47 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. He wore an orange jumpsuit instead of his contractor's confidence, flanked by public defenders instead of high-priced lawyers who'd abandoned him when the money dried up. The judge read the victim impact statements, teachers describing programs cut, parents detailing hours worked to replace stolen funds, communities still recovering from his previous schemes. When she pronounced the sentence 15 years federal time, full restitution, lifetime ban from any fiduciary position, Rick finally looked broken. As they led him away, our eyes met one last time. I expected to feel something: triumph, vindication, even pity. Instead, I felt only the quiet satisfaction of a spreadsheet that finally balanced. Outside the courthouse, Nora Bell was giving a statement to the press about moving forward, about rebuilding trust, about the strength found in transparency. Parents from 4 different schools stood behind her, united by shared violation and shared determination to prevent it happening again. "Ms. Hart," a reporter caught up to me in the parking lot. "How does it feel to be the whistleblower who brought down $1 million fraud ring?" "I wasn't a whistleblower," I corrected. "I was a data analyst who did her job. The parents who stood up, who demanded answers, who refused to accept, that's how things are done. They're the real heroes." "But you started it all." "No," I said, thinking of that night in the cafeteria, the weight of evidence in my jacket. "Rick Halverson started it. I just finished it." 6 months later, Cedar Grove Elementary held its first transparent auction fundraiser. Every donation tracked, every expense documented, every dollar accounted for in real time on a public dashboard I'd helped design. The new bleachers were being installed, purchased from a legitimate vendor at 40% less than Rick's inflated bid. The bathrooms had proper commercial fixtures. The playground equipment actually met safety standards. Emma Bell ran past, chasing friends on equipment that wouldn't wobble or rust within a year. Her mother watched from the new PTA office, visible through windows that had replaced Rick's preferred closed doors. My mother arrived with cookies for the bake sale, priced reasonably and labeled accurately. She'd started dating a philosophy professor who found corporate fraud morally fascinating but personally abhorrent a significant upgrade. "Any regrets?" Diana asked, joining me at the donation tracking station. I thought about the questions seriously. The investigation had cost me sleep, safety, and any relationship with Rick's extended family, but it had given me purpose, community, and the knowledge that one person with Excel skills and stubborn integrity could dismantle years of corruption. "Just one," I admitted. "What's that?" I should have started counting sooner. The fundraiser exceeded its goal by 30%. Every penny accounted for, every transaction transparent. As parents packed up, kids played on honest equipment, and the PTA board met in a room with glass walls. I realized this was what victory actually looked like. Not the dramatic courthouse moment or the audit room revelation, but this ordinary people doing ordinary things honestly, protected by systems that assumed someone would always be counting. Because someone would be in Maple Ridge, in communities across the state where our template had spread, in any place where public trust met private greed. Someone would be watching the numbers. The best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with spreadsheets, determination, and the quiet certainty that the math never lies. And in Cedar Grove Elementary, thanks to a botched election and a data analyst who refused to look away, the math finally added up. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. Share our thoughts about justice, community, and standing up for what's right. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. And if you really want to help more people discover this tale of truth triumphing over corruption, hit that hype button to boost this video. Until next time, keep counting, keep questioning, and keep believing that one person really can make a difference.